authority of the parent.
Okay, good afternoon, Earth. This is Adam Sturch broadcasting from Garage, our Taos, New Mexico, in between Allsup's and Outback Pizza. Today we got the scales in. Okay, the figure's looking a little better, still a little stiff, mechanical, and wonky, but we're working on it. I want to start the scale coloration today, which is going to be a myriad of various colors. We're going to start with a lavender, a scarlet red, and a skyish blue. And also I mixed up some sort of deep purplish, fleshy tone shadow color glaze to hit the edges of her face and model her neck and hands a little bit more cleanly. So I want to start with that, and the ear. And then we'll move on to scales. Here we go.
Well attached to the adults, want to be good for them. Now she's attached to the peer group. Now she wants to be good for them and doesn't give a damn what the adults want. It's an attachment problem. It's a relationship problem, not a behavior or a moral problem. So it's attachment that makes the child want to be good for the adult. It's attachment that makes the model out of the parent. So when kids are looking to you, they model themselves after you. It's attachment that triggers your own parenting instincts. When kids are attaching to you, like babies, they make big eyes at you, they're trying to connect with you, naturally your heart melts and you just want to take care of them. When a kid is resisting you, it triggers all the wrong instincts in you. It triggers your anger and your disappointment and your sense of hurt, and that's where we parent from. And then the experts come along, be tough. And it kind of appeals because you want to resume controlling it. So you think by being tougher, you're going to resume control. But here's the problem. And now I'm going to talk to you about oppositionality now. So can I just get somebody to, would you mind standing up for a minute? I'm just going to ask you to put your hand up like that, okay? So what are you doing right now? You're pushing back, and the harder I push, the harder you push, right? Great, so I could diagnose you with oppositional defiant disorder. Because you didn't deny it, you did oppose what I was doing, right? Hence you were oppositional. But you get what's wrong with this picture. If my foot was broken, would it be broken if I was here alone or the rest of you here present with me? Of course. If I had a viral disorder, if I had a viral illness, would I have it whether or not I was alone in the room or the rest of you here? Of course I would. But I could not be oppositional, obviously, about myself. Now, some of you don't seem to know what I'm talking about. Go home this afternoon, lock yourself into a room, make sure there's nobody else there, and try to oppose somebody. Okay? And if you succeed, by all means send me an email because I want to know how you did it. And that's what I'm saying, but oppositionality by definition implies a relationship. So instead of diagnosing kids, why don't we look at their relationships? Now, oppositionality such as Marzan just, am I saying that right? Marzan, okay. That's demonstrated is a natural human response to any sense of coercion. Gordon Neufeld, my brilliant psychologist friend, calls it counter-will. Counter-will is the natural force that we generate in response to any kind of force acting upon us. To any force of nature, to any opposite counter-force. So counter-will is the natural resistance to coercion. There's a reason for it. There's a reason for it. Why would it be that you would automatically oppose what I'm doing? Because you can't allow yourself to be pushed around. In order to be a separate, self-respective individual, you have to be able to resist coercion. Now, this begins happening around 1.5. That's when the kids start saying that awful word, no. Everything is no. And the parents often are worried at that point because they think that somehow a cute, cuddly, compliant little baby is all of a sudden morphed into a monster. But everything is no. Well, in fact, nature has an agenda there. Nature's agenda is that the child should grow up to be an independent person and have a will of their own. Now, how do you develop a will when the parental will is so much more powerful and the parent himself or herself is so much more powerful? Well, you do it by opposing the parent. And so those know that counter-will is nature's little way of building a small fence around the child's growing incipient little will, behind which the child can develop his own preferences, his own meanings, his own understanding. What he likes, what he doesn't like. So first there's an automatic no, and then later on, as we mature, we say yes when we want to and no when we don't want to. but it remains with us all our lives. It's a particular dynamic that's in us all our life, as you just demonstrated, is resistant to push. When we push harder, just as when I pushed harder in your hand, what happens? The resistance increases. The more we push in our kids, the more resistance we're going to get. They can't help it. They're not doing it. Nature's doing it. You didn't do it. It wasn't a conscious decision. Had you thought about it, you could have just dropped your arm. You could have. But the natural response is to resist. That's just nature, instinct in action. And in its proper context, it serves a good function to maintain our integrity, to hold on to our integrity as individuated, separate, self-motivated individuals. What mitigates counter will is relationship. When you're connecting with somebody, you're much less likely to oppose them. Your opposition will be softened. Again, when you're in love, and your partner asks you for something, you're likely to comply. In fact, you're delighted to. 5 years later, when you've been living together for a while, and you're taking the relationship for granted now, you still love them, but you're not in that acute attachment phase anymore. They ask you to do the same thing. Do it yourself. Now, with our kids, as long as they're attaching to us, they still have that oppositionality, but it's manageable. When children become peer attached, disconnected from adults, all you're left with is the oppositionality with nothing to mitigate it. And there you have the oppositional child. It's got nothing to do with anything innate to their character. It's just their relationships. And how that's played out, that's what they're acting out. And by the way, this is true for rewards as well as punishments. Because when you're trying to reward kids through, when you're trying to motivate kids through rewards, what are they sensing? They're sensing that there's something you want them to do more than they want to do it themselves. If that wasn't the case, you wouldn't have to reward them, would you? And hence, the reward is a kind of emotional coercion. I know you don't want to do this, but I'm not making it worth your while. What do we call that in every aspect of life except childhood? We call it bribery. We think we can bribe our kids into good behaviors. An American psychologist who studied motivation said, the truth is that there are no techniques that will motivate people or to make them autonomous. Motivation must come from within, not from techniques. It comes from their deciding that they're ready to take responsibility for managing themselves. In other words, motivation comes from maturation, not from any kind of coercion. And think about it in your own life. If you want to know the impact of rewards and how you respond. Are you ready for this? You come home from work, and you're hungry, and you're tired, and you're sweaty, and you're stressed, and you're alienated. And your partner or lover or friend says to you, or your spouse says to you, hey sweetheart, I see that you're hungry and tired and sweaty and stressed and alienated, but I really feel like having sex. So I'm going to pay you $20. I know that the economy of Ontario has been heavily hit by this crisis, so that I don't know what inducement that would be for many of you here, but the normal response would be, hey, heck with you, $20. It's got nothing to do with me, it's not my needs, I don't want to do this, you want to do this. Keep your money and keep your sex for that matter. Well, these are the techniques that we're taught to employ with our kids. And all we're doing is increasing their resistance. When you look at the studies on when you reward kids to play with certain toys, as soon as you stop to pay, they stop to play. When you allow the kids to play with it spontaneously, they're likely to continue to play with it. When you're rewarding them, they'll stop as soon as the reward ends. Now, so parenting becomes really difficult once kids become parenting. What about child development? Child development also stops in its tracks. Because for development, you need a certain quality called vulnerability. A tree doesn't grow where it's hard and thick. It grows where it's soft and green and vulnerable. An animal like a crab encased in a hard shell cannot grow inside that hard encasement. It has to mold, make itself vulnerable and soft in order to grow. The same thing is true for human development. In the downtown east side of Vancouver, I work with hardcore drug addicts, people that are heavily addicted to cocaine and heroin, and they have terrible lives. And I read this paragraph this morning, and I'll read it to you again. And I'm illustrating something with child development, by the way. Detective Sergeant Paul rescued children from the purveyors of internet pornography. As the Globe and Mail reported on his retirement from police work, 6 years at that job had not inured him to the horrors he witnessed. Paul Gillespie still can't get used to the sounds of crying and pain and the graphic videos of children being raped and molested that he's seen all too often on the web. It's beyond horrible to listen to the soundtracks of these movies that Canada's best-known child porn caught. But it is the silent images of desolate children that tear most at his heart. They're not screaming, just accepting, he said, of the infants captured in his pictures. They have dead eyes. You can tell that their spirit is broken. That's their life. Well, 2 quick points here. The first point is about drugs and drug laws. If that same policeman had been transferred to the drug squad, who'd be chasing in the streets would be those same kids 20 years later, because they're the ones who become hardcore drug addicts. In the downtown inside of Vancouver, where I worked for the last 12 years, North America's most concentrated area of drug use, there's nobody who wasn't traumatized in childhood. That's the first point. But the second point is, what those dead eyes? Why do kids' eyes go dead? Well, what it is, it's a form of self-protection. The brain shuts down the feeling of emotion when the emotions are too unbearable. So when children are traumatized, they shut down emotionally. That's the only thing the brain can do to protect them. The brain can't make them escape, can't make them strong enough to fight back, but the brain can shut down the emotions. And what the problem is, that when emotions shut down, people stop developing. So the heavily drug addicted adult, on the emotional level, functions like a 2-year-old, because that's when they stop developing. Then, of course, they're punished for it. But what we're seeing in North America now is a massive emotional shutdown of youth, even though most kids were not abused. What happened? What happens is, what protects you as a child is a nurturing relationship with a protective adult. So if you can go to adults who really hear you and really get what you're experiencing, then you can stay open and vulnerable, because you'll be protected and emotionally held. So look at the suicide victims of those kids who are bullied and they kill themselves. Over and over again, what you find is that there's no adult they could talk to about it. They were cut off from adults. That's what made them victims, for the most part. I'm not trying to be categorical about it, but that's what we find most of the time. So when you're being hurt and you've lost your natural protection, the one way to respond to that is to shut down emotionally. And how do we see the shutdown now? You see it in the drugs our kids are using, because their stimulants like crystal meth will certainly wake you up and make you feel vital and alive when you shut down. We see it in the extreme sports, in the way that kids have to risk themselves. That's the only way they can feel alive. Why do they shut down emotionally? And I haven't told you the reason why yet, but they shut down emotionally. We see it in the self-cutting behaviors. There's a tremendous epidemic of cutting now. Why do people cut? Well, there's a song by a group called the 9 Inch Nails that Johnny Cash sang on one of his last albums. It goes, I hurt myself today, it seems like a feel. When you shut down emotionally, you need to cut to see if you still feel something. And the gore and the violence in the culture. The movies that are so explicitly and really, to a normal person, I would say disgustingly blood-driven and disturbingly violent. And that's what our kids are watching. Why? Because it takes that much to get them even a little bit excited. When they shut down emotionally. So what's going on? What's going on is when you become peer-oriented, you lose your natural shield, which are the nurturing adults. Now the peer group is not a safe group to belong to. It's not safe not because kids are cruel by nature, but simply because they're immature. And without adult guidance, there's a lot of dissing and bullying and exclusion and bad-mouthing and so on. A lot of pain is being inflicted by kids of one another. How do you protect yourself? Well, as long as you have adult contacts, by talking about it. When you've lost that, by shutting down emotionally. Once you shut down emotionally, then you have to have all these constant stimulation, the constant noise, the constant music, the constant video, the constant scintillating light show that kids are exposing themselves to, the constant contacting one another. The driving of kids into hyperactivity and self-harming behaviors because of the loss of contact and hence their emotional shutdown. And they stop developing because, as I say, for development you need vulnerability. So when you shut down against vulnerability, you stay immature. So now you've got generations of kids who are staying immature well into their 20s and their 30s. And if you want to see how immature they're staying, look at the TV programs that they're watching. It's all about exploitation. It's all about relationship and who's betraying whom, competition, who's going to beat whom. And many of the TV programs actually exploit the most vulnerable. If you like programs like the Jerry Springer Show and so on, it's all about exploiting vulnerable people to make fun of them. That's immature culture. Why? Because the culture reflects the tastes, the degraded tastes of immature youth. I'm not generalizing about children, I'm talking about trends. Not every kid is like that, but there's grades of it. I'm talking about general trends. Now, I'll quickly finish here because I want to leave lots of time for questions. In terms of schooling and education, it totally undermines it because for the primary quality necessary for learning is a sense of curiosity, and curiosity is vulnerable. Because when you're curious, you have to admit that you care about something. If you care about something, you can be hurt. If you shut down against vulnerability, you don't care. So you're not curious. You also admit that you don't know, or you have to admit that you don't know when you're defending yourself. So that teacher's job is made infinitely more difficult. There's more to this. There's several ways of learning, but all of them are related to attachment. When you lose your attachments, for example, what do you pay attention to? You pay attention to what you're attached to. If you're attached to adults, you'll want to pay attention to what the adults think is important. If you're attached to the kids, you'll pay attention to who's dating who and who's not, who doesn't like who and who's wearing what. And if you look at the diaries of girls, as a study did in the States 50, 60 years ago, you know what the primary concern of girls was 60 years ago? You wouldn't believe this. It was, how can I make a contribution to society? That's what they wrote about. Now when you look at girls' diaries, it's, what do I look like, and how well accepted am I going to be by my peers? This has become the prime concern of many of our adolescents. The epidemic of plastic surgery, what is it all about? It's about not having the sense that you're loved and accepted for who you are, but you're loved and accepted for your looks. And all the makeover shows and America's Top Model shows is all about exploiting this anxiety of not looking good enough, because if I don't look good enough, I'm not good enough. So the ramifications are everywhere. What to do about it? First of all, you have to get that was gone missing. We can't restore the village. We can't go back to the tribe, the way we used to live. But we can recreate those attachment dynamics in our lives. We can recreate them by first not fomenting and fostering peer orientation. So when your kids have been in daycare the whole week, don't have sleepovers on the weekend. Don't have play dates. Why bring the enemy into your own house? That 3-year-old fiend that's going to seduce your 3-year-old son, don't do that. I don't mean that kids shouldn't play with one another. I mean that when they spend the whole week in each other's company, they need adult company. Don't take peers along on vacations. Don't think that you're socializing kids by having to play with each other. Don't think that self-esteem is built through, all the research that shows that self-esteem is based on how much your peers like you. It's such nonsense. Think about it. When your self-esteem is based on how other people like you, that's not self-esteem. Self-esteem doesn't say that I'm worthwhile because people like me. Self-esteem says I'm worthwhile. Then I can be my own person. If people like me, that's great. If they don't like me, that's too bad. But, you know, I'm esteeming this person that I am. So when you build self-esteem on peer acceptance, you're building it on sand. And even the kids who get it feel insecure because they know we're shifting and how insecure it is. Kids don't get socialized through other playing with other kids. What's socialization? You're socialized when you have a sense of who you are and you can respect the differentness and individuality of other people. That's when you socialize. Can you talk about a 2-year-old being socialized? That's a question of maturation. Don't think that you need to push your kids away and make them independent. Independence is nothing you have to work at. Independence is what happens spontaneously. Every creature in nature seeks to become independent. They have to. That's how they survive. So independence is nature's natural agenda. First comes the attachment relationship, which is the basis for everything, and that stays with us all our lives. And then comes the sense of a separate self, individuation, so that you can function as a separate individual, and then you can respect the separateness of others. So these are stages that follow upon one another. They happen spontaneously. All you have to do is to meet the child's attachment needs. Individuation or independence will follow, and socialization will follow. And we're far too consumed by making our kids independent. We push them away too early. And we're far too consumed in socializing them, but that's putting the cart before the horse. That's not how nature actually works. You just have to follow the natural agenda. The schools need to get into the attachment game. If our kids are going to spend most of their time in preschools and daycares and schools, we better make sure that those institutions meet the kids' attachment needs. Otherwise, we're just creating peer orientation factories. Studies in the United States have shown that kids in daycares have higher levels of stress hormone levels than those same kids at home. Except in those daycares where there's a decent adult-to-child ratio and where there's a good attachment to the adults. So the issue is not that children have to be at home.
All right, that's a step in the right direction.
Places where adults are attaching with them.
Oh, here.
Where they don't have to then, by default, attach to the peer group.
Slide up and zoom
That's
in.
the point. And if our kids are going to spend
It helps
most
the
of our time away
shadows,
from us,
helps
we better make sure
her
that where they are places
shape
of
a
attachment.
little bit.
Number one. Number two,
So
when
from
you see them at
here,
the
I
end
guess
of the
we'll
day,
start with scales
don't assume that
after
they're
a
still your
break.
kids.
Next take coming up.
But it's only a matter of choice.
Okay, before I get into scales, once again, I'm going to do some little overall adjustment.
I don't have the answer
I'm going to start with the black
I think it's
hole
amazing
scene.
that I'm
I'm
able
going to
to
pink glaze the moon, give it some sort of glowing color, and then do a horizon fade of purple. And then I think I'm going to take the lemon yellow and reinforce the opacity of the cityscape gold. So here we go.
And say, my God, nature is alive. It's talking to us. It's alive. No, this is not a metaphor. I am not a romantic. This is not an artistic or aesthetic stance. Nature is alive. Someone is on the line. Well, as far as who, I don't rush in to say. I mean, I'm very wary of anyone who claims to know who, because the problem seems to me run of great subtlety and depth. How can we know who is the other until we know who is the self? And perhaps one problem will cast the significance on the other.
Speaking of the self, isn't any discipline or spiritual path ultimately the threshold looking into the light of the one who sees? And if one can do that, without physical substances influencing the body, look through that window and experience that luminous beingness, isn't that sufficient without the use of physical substances?
Well, I think that's the challenge that the temporary encounter with this thing sets us. But yes, if we can encounter it temporarily through these shamanic means, then must it not become the historical arrow of our becoming? Must we not then recognize that this numinosum must rise into history as a fact of realizing the eschaton? That's what I think. That actually the shamans are seeing and have always seen some kind of transhistorical object, some kind of vast hypostatization of ourselves as deity that is casting a shadow back through time, and that all magic, all religion, all vision is an anticipation of this future state. What excites me is the notion that we may have reached the point in this process where we can consciously know that that is what we are doing, that that is what we are about, that our task is the architectonic expression of the divine other, and then set about it without any more haggling and tail dragging. In other words, to realize what our destiny is will cause us to move toward it with much greater facility and smoothness. This woman at the door.
I have a son who was in a fag for 2 years using dirt. What do we say to our children about this?
Well, this is a real problem. I think it goes to the general state of the drug problem, which is it is one of utter ignorance and victimization. And the government whines and yaps about education, but they're not doing any education. I mean, what do you mean by dope? I mean, they have so linguistically impoverished us that we can't even make a distinction between marijuana, methamphetamine, cocaine, LSD, what have you. A whole new vocabulary of consequences has to be created. That's what I said earlier. What we don't want is habitual, obsessive, unexamined activity. We don't want it in commerce. We don't want it in drug use. We don't want it in social relations. We don't want unexamined habitual forms of activity that are obsessively expressed. What we do want is conscious, caring, self-examining, inquisitive, thinking people and institutions. So whatever mitigates against that has to be seen as a drug. And things like television, money, propaganda, all of these things then are seen as great evils, which they may not have been seen that way before. We have to get smart. You have to be smart to use drugs. You have to be smart to survive a planetary catastrophe. Now, our ancestors were smart. They got us this far. It wasn't easy. 5 times the ice moved south from the poles. 5 times the human family was islanded and divided by walls of moving ice. It hasn't been easy all the way along. Until 100 years ago, there were no inoculations for infectious diseases. Most women died in childbirth. Many children died in childbirth. The average lifespan, even in Western societies, is 35 years old. So it's going to be tough until we get to heaven. There has to be intelligence. And, one way to be intelligent is to be conditioned. Our lives are not going to make sense if we tolerate propaganda in our lives. You cannot be half slave and half free. You cannot be half hip and half yep. So the main thing with the drug thing is to get smart, get real smart, fast, so you will lose your children and your mind and your freedom, because all this is at stake. This audience has supposedly a stake in psychology, in transpersonal psychology, which means the destiny and fate of the human mind. So getting smart about the natures and opportunities of chemistry, archaic and modern, should be right at the top of the agenda. We're going to have to end this. Thank you for your tolerance.
It's the weirdest thing. I feel like I've been.
Are those feathers on this table?
So how many of you have noticed in the last year or the last 6 months that things are happening faster and faster? Special things like weird synchronous events, like, whoa, that's low probability, right? Is that happening to everyone? Something is going on. Something is going on. And we're trying to come up with an explanation for all of this, which I call like the geek's model for God. So with that, I'm going to get us a little grounded. Josh mentioned that I go way back. And yes, I'm 57, which means I go way back. I remember Neil Armstrong setting foot on the moon in 1969. Is anybody here? A few? Yes? So that's good enough. I went out the week after, when they were on the moon, I went out to pick up the garbage cans at the street in our town. And I looked and looked and looked, trying to figure if I could see a little glint on the moon. And little did I know that Michael Collins, who was the lunar module commander or pilot, had a high-powered telescope looking down, trying to find them. He had a great difficulty. I don't think he ever sighted them. Isn't that amazing? He's 60 miles up. So to ground us a little, I'm going to hand out this precious thing. We named it Precious when I was at Weta Workshop in New Zealand. This got named by the founder of Weta as basically the blowout material for Mount Doom that contains the ring, but that's a whole other story. But what this is the one of the oldest evidence for life on Earth. It's a stromatolite from Western Australia, and little ridges that you'll be able to touch and move your fingertips around are stromatolites. They're microbial gnat community. It was the sole story of life on Earth for 3 billion years. And for most exoplanets, probably this is all they got to before the planet went out of habitability. So feel this for a moment, because this is from an alien world. This is a world where there's no oxygen in the atmosphere. There's like coffee-colored oceans and orange skies and asteroid impacts and massive braided river systems and volcanoes just going. So this is from about 3 billion years ago, so just pass it around. And it kind of is grounding, because this is your common ancestor. This is what made us. Because the microbial gnat community built the world that we're in. It oxygenated the atmosphere, it dumped all that red iron out of the oceans, and made the world ready for complex life. It took a lot of labor. So what we're going to do is take you on a journey. Oops. It's not working. You may have to pull out and put it back in. Play out. Oh, something just happened. Oh, wait. There we go. Wonderful. So we're going to try to answer the question, what is going on? Which Terence McKenna used to love to ask. What is going on? But the answer, sort of the furtherance of this question, I call this the field. This thing that is connecting all of us, that is doing all this synchronous magic for us. that we can make requester calls and stuff comes back. Does anyone do that? Make a requester call like, I need a car pass for Burning Man. Boom, it comes. It's a miracle. So the field is amazing. What are its origins? How did it start up in humans? How did we learn how to snap pixels? We'll see about that. Consciousness. What the heck is it? And how do we cruise it and how do we hack it? And something new, first seen here, this is Peoria, right? So you're going to get the first thing, the big download. It's an extra bonus icing. So, bootstrapping life. Yeah, let's start from here just to save time. Okay, so you can see this data all online. Oh, good, this is working. So 100 and some plus years ago, Charles Darwin wrote this incredible sentence about.
Oh, looks like it's about to rain. I got to take my books and paintings in. So I'm going to pause it here, and we'll come back for scales.
Hunting insects for protein. That was their main protein.
Okay,
they
here we
were
go.
chewing down
Scale
leaves
time.
and they craved berries and sap. And
I'm just going to leave it panned
basically
down because I
flies in a
might
shake
move around
diet.
up and down the
So the next time you just can't resist, passing the in and out, it's because of your insectivore nature. So where did they live? They lived up in the rainforest canopy in these huge giant trees. And they lived like this. They lived in a kind of a, come on, say it, they lived in balls, in communal balls. And for safety and warmth and things like this. So picture this. It's dawn in the Amazon or / African belt forest. And what happens is this little guy here, a little gal, I call her Overdrive. She's the explorer of the Positivian world. She has planned this all out because their brains are tiny but devious. Right, they're our ancestors. So she's waiting for the dawn because why? Because when that light hits the rainforest canopy, she will see the nightly tree production of sap, which is like pure sugar, pretty much. So she peels herself away from the ball, not waking them up, and starts her move out to the limb because she sees the globule of tree sap just lit up. And she gets to the globule of tree sap and she starts sucking it down. Now it does two things for her. It gets her high. So she's like, whoa! She's noticing the stars and like, what is going on? She's sort of waking up. And one eye is looking back at the ball because if she gets seen, it's community property, she'll get busted. Her ass will get busted. And big time because she's taking the sacred elixirs. And she is with a trippy brain, she's now looking forward and she sees a pattern of squares in the dawn across the tree limb. Like, oh, what's that? Oh, that's cool. What was that? It just moved. It just moved. What is that? Well, it's this. So waiting for her a trillion times, a trillion trips to the elixir, a quest for the mind to open and get high. Does that sound familiar? There is this waiting, lurking in the wings, or literally the head is of this, the number one predator for us for 60 million years, the tree snakes. And it's waiting, and she either jumps, and she recognizes the pattern of the scales, or she snaps down. She snaps two, she snaps down. Snaps two, snaps down. Snaps two, runs back, makes a copy of herself. This is where we got our vision. So we were always a little psychedelic. But basically, the human brain grew, but the core of the human brain was a pixel processor because of this snake thing that went for 60 million years. We were really good at seeing these patterns, but it was at the core of our consciousness. So by the time you get to Ardipithecus, and you get to some of these guys, they're all tripping out on patterns all the time. And so what are the patterns? The patterns started this way as tree snake scales, which evolved with us as we started to figure them out. They got more colorful, they got more mesmerizing. But we turned it into this. We turned it into culture. We turned it into everything we've done. The patterns on these chairs, carpets, books, illustrations, TV, media. We turned it into the modern world. So we built this. This is what our consciousness has wrought from, in a sense, being trained by the serpent. So these amazing megacities that are all just basically a freaking ton of pixels or voxels. So this is the world we came from, this beautiful world, but in the meantime, we're kind of making an ugly world. We're replacing the old, gooey world of agriculture with the pixelated world. I call this Emerald in the Azure civilization. The Azure is replacing the Emerald, pretty much. Now, what is going on? So again, Terrence, what is going on? Well, we've learned a lot in the last 40 or 50 years about how people booted up. So now perhaps we understand how our pixel consciousness booted up. But what about our internals? Because every species comes through traumatic stress in order to evolve. And we sure did. I mean, 60 million years of fighting with tree serpents is very traumatic. So when you come across a snake on the path, as we did the other day, Aaron just jumped. I mean, it's hardwired, right? So it's a fundamental, it's trauma, but it's valuable. Because if you get bitten, you're not going to reproduce. So, but what is going on with all that trauma? It's kind of like a little kid inside of all of us. You know when you get really super activated? I call this the inner kindergarten, and every one of us has them. But what does it do in society? This screaming inner kindergarten. And where is it from? How's it represented? So here's a beautiful example of this on the playa about 3 years ago. Look at that couple that just is not having a good day, but look what's inside reaching out. Just a beautiful image. The little children, they're there. So what is going on with us? At the same time as we're in inner kindergarten and we're confused and we're enlightened sometimes, and sometimes we're really not, and other things happen, this has come into our lives. And we're looking at one right now. We're mesmerized by this thing. Huh? What happens when you're on your phone and you're doing this, and first you wake up in the morning and you're doing this? Dopamine? What else? You hold your breath. Studies show that people hold their breaths when they're looking at the screen. Just like overdrive, sitting there, sucking down her morning coffee, watching the TV of the snake scale, getting all tripped out, and she becomes a prey. So in a sense, the serpent is here, it's back, we made it, it's called technology. It's coiled around us tightly. It's coiling ever tightly around us, our whole civilization. So coming through that serpent is, very serpent-like, is all this stuff, right? Like anxiety-inducing, crazy-making. It's this coiling in of, things aren't good in the world, even though if you look outside, everything's good and your latte's been made and everything. But so what is going on? It's sort of self-predation. Part of ourself is predating on another part. And that part is probably a wounded part from our trauma. So if we talk and resource that wounded part and that trauma, we'll release the serpent's coil. Now the serpent is evolving us, but it could strangle us too. It could completely eliminate us if we don't deal with this thing. Totally, right? Everyone feels it. We could totally self-strangle in some way. So here's a great metaphor from 1983. Do you remember this scene? From Northern California. This is Luke Skywalker who has defeated Darth. And Darth is his father. You know about that, right? Great mythology that Lucas... Huh? No. I'm from Canada, I know nothing. So, what does Darth say? James Earl Jones, great voice. Luke, take off this mask. Take off my mask. So he takes off the mask. What does he see? This wounded being that represented the Empire. You know, this amazingly soft-eyed being. So this in the 1980s was a representation of the fundamental thing that we need to do is look at this wounded child throughout our society. Huge lesson right from here, right from Northern California. Pretty powerful stuff. So this is some of Mikey Siegel's work in consciousness hacking at Esalen about 1.5 years ago. And this is an amazing thing. It's just like kind of like the heart sync connected to auditory, connected to this visual stimulation. So you could see other people's heartbeats. And it was timed to music. And wherever heart sync has been tried out, it has created this complete union between people. Even if it's just two people in a little pod at Burning Man, people don't want to get out of it. They get out and they're like, whoa! You know, it's amazing. So why I'm showing you this is that this is a serpent, this is tech, this is pixels, but we're using it for something else. We're using it to open consciousness, create empathy. So we can use the serpent for that too. It's the greatest tool we've ever made. It's just amazing. So it really is about healing this inner kindergarten. That is actually our great technology, our great challenge of this century. And we're learning how to do it. You know, I'm in a program with some of the people here called Luminous Awareness, and that's the tech that we work on, is healing our inner kindergartens. So and it produces huge transformative change. You can work with the medicines, you can work with the Vipassana, you can work with 100 practices, but humanity has the greatest tools we've ever had to do this job in this century. So what does this all prepare us for? This understanding of where we might have come as a living world, and then how we boot up. How did we boot up as a species? Well, I think you're ready for real geeky stuff? Prepares us for us geeks to meet our God. The geek God. Consciousness, cruising and hacking the geek God. So for me, the geek God was, geez Louise, what was the magic, secret, fantastic thing, the alchemical thing that carried physics into biology? That amazing process, right? You think about it. You got this cosmos that gets a D for creativity, right? 10 billion years you go back, and when we look through James Webb, we're going to see like, oh my God, it's the same galaxies and the same dust and the same everything for billions of years, not much productivity. And the cosmos gets a D. But suddenly when you get life, you get huge uptake in complexity. So what happened there? Well, one night I did my usual dream, my usual, what they call an endostate dream. And I asked it, I said, well, how were we made? And it said, are you sitting down? And I said, I'm lying down. And I was shown this undulating plane of physics, and it said, push on one side. So I pushed on one side, and it undulated, pre-stated, classical physics. And then I noticed that there was this little blob in the depths of physics. It was my favorite thing in the world, a protocell. A membranous compartment that can capture things and not let them go, and make them interact. So, oh cool, a protocell. Oh, suddenly two protocells appeared next to each other, and there was stuff going across this sort of dip between them. There's a lot more traffic than I thought there would be. Well, what's going on? Oh, and then a whole bunch of them appeared in a slouch. But there was all this transmission across their membranes, and it sort of looked like a little simple network. And then the dream, which was a very geeky dream, said, okay, here's 3 Cartesian plots. Okay, what's this one? And it had a P on it. And I said, I don't know what that is. It says, oh, come on. And I said, well, P for probability? It said, bingo. Probability. That any time you crowd things together in an enclosure, you increase the probability of things happening. Okay. And I said, what's the second curve? I don't know, some kind of interconnection or something? He said, yes, look. Stuff is flowing through here, get a clue. Like, it's a network effect. It can happen just on its own, spontaneously. Physics can't do this. Or, well, physics is doing this, but it's new. It's a new thing in the universe. And then it said to me, well, what's the third curve? What is it? Come on. I said, I don't know, some kind of memory or something? He said, bingo. On this structure can arise the first memory, the genetic polymer, which are now seen in the lab, which is really cool. Memory can emerge on a system with probability shaping and interconnection. It can emerge on its own, a memory templating system. So where does this all go? Well, it kind of then got abstracted, like, okay, he said, buddy, there are 3 things here. Probability shaping, like rolling of a dice. Interaction network, which grow. And a memory system, which gets bigger and bigger. More memories get written and read and written and read. And it said to me, this is it. This is all you need to create all the complexity that you think that you understand. So probability shaping, protocells, interconnection, mass of protocells, memory, genes moving around horizontally in the protocellular mass. What's happening in this room, you've all come to this meeting, you're crowded together in an enclosure, we're doing this interaction, symbolic messages are passing around, and you're remembering stuff that's being recorded to be shared. That's cultural evolution. PIM, the same process. So it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. It's like a TOE, the theory of everything type thing. So is this a blueprint for sort of an engine of creation, a general formalism? Or you could even say, is it kind of like the Copernican revolution, where Copernicus said, I think that things rotate around the sun, not around the earth. And he published this after his death, so he didn't lose his head or his funding. Well, Galileo got in trouble, but he published this map of, well, it's the heliocentric universe. This is called the Copernican revolution. It was a major deal for hundreds of years. It showed that we weren't the center of everything. There were other worlds. And then when Galileo saw the moons of Jupiter, he realized, wow, there's a whole other solar system here. So could it be that this PIM little formalism we discovered in our chemistry is actually at the center of any generative and emergent system? So perhaps it can touch physics because it can give physics a way to read and write information which they've never had. It's actually kind of a revolution in chemistry and in geology for the origin of life. It is actually teaching us where to look for life in the universe. I mean, cycling systems of compartmentalization. It's going now into evolutionary biology, into something called niche construction theory with our work with groups in the UK. Is this actually the basis for the generation even of experience itself? And perhaps a way to roll complexity theory and AI into a new generation. Because currently, AI and machine learning don't use genes and they don't use evolution, right? Could this be the basis for future AI? I think so. So, take a look at this through time. Physics of the cosmos. Remember I said the cosmos gets a D? Because all it is doing is been doing this on-off thing, state changing for billions of years. Stars form, they blow up. Stuff encounters, it's state changing, but it doesn't have linear information, it doesn't remember things. So when you introduce biology for the first time, you have this PIM system, things are remembered, they're called genes, and allows you to build better cells in the future. So you have a third state. Then suddenly neurons come. Now we're getting closer to consciousness here. Neurons are an ability to pass information and have memory and change the response of an organism while it's alive, not just between generations. Then if you pack enough neurons together, it might create something called consciousness. Just get a lot of them together. Now that's where you guys all come in, how many, you know. But what we're proposing here is that this PIM formalism underlies all observable phenomena and all self-experience. It's just continuously generating them. And I'll show you a clue about this, that human consciousness can only sample a small subset of this. That this generative system, which is running at all levels, at all scale, from the entire planet, down to individual protocells, down to metabolic cycles, is creating a field, a collective field. So here's the overview again. Physics, 2-state, 3-state, biology, 4-state, learning, 5-state, consciousness, and then where do we go? Well, perhaps that it's when conscious beings, you could argue that we are conscious or not, but we support awareness, looking back on the totality of our origins and evolution, like we're doing in this room tonight. We come into a state of, wow, or what Buddha said was, like, oh, the nirvana. So perhaps in seeing all this and grokking all this, we come into the state of what would be in the old days called unity consciousness. But it's just a knowing how rare we are, but knowing where we started from and the process that made it. It's so large, it's so stupendously complex that you go into this state of So here's a model, because of course us nerds and hackers need ways to test things. So I would suggest to you that the synchronous field that I talked about in the beginning is a server available for
all right, I barely dented the scales, barely scratched the surface on the scale coloration. But you know what? I'm kind of tired. So in honor of Gabor Mate, great hero, I'm going to listen to Being Tired and sit the fuck down and enjoy the rain air for the rest of the day. But that's a pretty good step for the moment. We got her shadows worked on the face. Oh, and for anyone curious, that's Dr. Bruce Dahmer in the background. His lecture Origins on my playlist of Dr. Bruce Dahmer. Amazing lecture, along with one that I posted yesterday. What did I call that one? Don't know what the hell that is, but it's on my YouTube channel as well, under the Dahmer list. But anyway, got some hand shadows, readjusted her fingernails, that's looking a little less stiff, a little better. Her face, looking much more dimensional now, still needs work. Ears a little better, his hands a little better. Yellow in the background, a little cleaner. And the scales are started, so that's tits. I'm going to have to use a very thick, opaque paint for each scale because it's a very textured surface and I want them very smooth. So I want them very jewel-like. And that's going to be a trick. It's going to take some time, but I think the result will be nice. So anyway, and a little work on the black hole sky escape there. That's it for the moment. Thank you for watching. That's Adam Sturch broadcasting from Garage Art today. Taos, New Mexico, in between Allsup's and Outback Pizza. Working on oil painting. Here we are. Have a good day.